Well, we're glad you're here.
I said I'm at my house. They're going to there's a concert downtown. New Boys or something like that. Whole bunch of them.
I used to be in that band when I was.
That's the new kids on the block, wasn't it? She copied these articles for us. Yes. We don't like to say that out loud.
I'd like to call to order the November 30th, 2011 meeting of the Milton School Committee, and as is our custom, I invite you to stand and salute the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get underway with tonight's agenda, I'd ask your indulgence for a moment of silence in memory of longtime public school teacher Kathy Rowland, who died this week. Any additions, corrections to tonight's agenda? One labeled revised that came out this afternoon, yes.
I was not planning on talking about health and wellness.
All right. So we can drop that off.
Is that okay, Mary?
Excellent.
Any other, we're always amenable to dropping things off the agenda, that's fine. Anything else? Seeing as we'll declare that approved. And now we move into the citizen speak portion of our agenda. I don't have the list, but I recognize one person for citizen speak. Ms. Friedman Hannah, if you'd come and give us your name and address and
Good evening. I'm Karen Friedman Hannah. My address is 3 Norway Road. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of you, given this time of Thanksgiving. I so appreciate everything that you do for our kids and the town as a whole. I say that to you individually, but I'd like to say it on the record. I totally appreciate everything that you do. I'm here in a couple of capacities. First and foremost, as a parent of a graduating senior and a parent of a past student who's graduating college this year, who both of my kids are extremely passionate about music and the music program that they've had here in Milton. In fact, my daughter is graduating as a music major and, quite honestly, is hopeful at some point to work as a music teacher in the Milton schools. So it's definitely seen her through. My son has been in the music program all the way through as well, and I will tell you it's probably what's kept him on course his entire schooling. I'm also the co-president of FAME, which is the advocacy group for music in the Milton schools. And I heard it through the grapevine, just yesterday actually, that there is the potential for some budget cuts to the music program, depending on how the budget plays out in this coming year. And so as both a parent and the advocate, the president of the advocacy group for music in the schools, I'm here to please have you consider that no matter what the budget issues are, that not be an option of considering cuts to the music program. Music is one of our only universal languages. Music inspires, music relaxes, music educates, music calms, music rehabilitates, as we just saw in the news for Gabby Gibbons, how they use music to help her brain recover. There are so many aspects to music that are beneficial to kids of all ages, but especially at the youngest ages in our schools. It lays the foundation for them to have an understanding and a passion and a development of something that will serve them in every capacity throughout their schooling and throughout their lives. To consider even slightly the idea of cutting music even more than it already has been is just something that cannot be considered. Our kids deserve the right to develop their brains in this way. They deserve the right to have a passionate experience in something that will drive them and see them through many, many, many life experiences. I have pages and pages of studies that I can share with you along the way throughout this budgeting process to help you understand that the cost of cutting music from our program at any level will be much higher than what the budget benefits are that you save. And so, and I promise you I will get the masses together to come out and speak in force about it as the process is going. So I really hope that you will consider not having it on the table at all. I am also here as a town meeting member to say that this to me is of utmost importance. And I know that this is only in a worst case scenario that these cuts to music and the other departments are being considered. But as a town meeting member, I will be very vocal at the importance of having whatever additions to the budget we might be getting through the increased revenue to the town, that they be earmarked for where it should be, to the schools, to the departments in town, to keeping our programs strong. It's what is making Milton special. It's what's keeping it in the magazines as the #2 place to live, potentially moving up to #1 at some point. We must keep our programs strong, and the money has to be going to what is important, and that's our programming. So it's a preliminary thought for you, but I hope that you will keep it in mind all along the way how important this is to me, to my family, and to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids and families in this town. And I just hope that you see it the same way. Thank you.
I see no one else for citizen speak, so we will move on to the rest of our agenda. First, the preliminary stuff, the minutes of our regular meeting of October 12th. I entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Mr. Walker. Any comments, corrections, discussion on the minutes of October 12th? Hearing none, I'll move to a vote. And all those in favor of the minutes of October 12th? Opposed? Abstaining? It's 501 with Ms. Bagley-Jones abstaining. Next, we move to October 26th. Again, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of October 26th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Mr. Walker. Again, any comments, corrections, additions, amendments? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 26th? That is unanimous. Minutes of November 2nd.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Ms. Bagley-Jones this time. Any, again, additions, deletions, comments, corrections? Yes, Ms. Sheridan.
Under the Health and Wellness Subcommittee report, it says the body shop
which
curriculum.
page?
I'm sorry, page 7.
Thank you.
It's actually called the Great Body Shop Curriculum.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for taking that.
You have that, Ann? It's the second bullet on the middle of page 7. It should be great body shop. Anything else? Seeing no further, move to a vote again. All those in favor of the minutes, November 2nd, 2011? And that is unanimous once again. And finally, our minutes of November 21st.
Move approval.
Approval by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Mrs. Kelly. Any comments, corrections? Yeah, Ms. Kelly?
Just a comment that this is actually a morning meeting that's primarily Finance Subcommittee, but the full committee was asked to attend if they wanted to, because it was discussing the budget. So it looks a little bit different, and it's definitely at 7 a.m. in the morning rather than 7 p.m.
Any other corrections, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes of November 21st? Opposed? Abstaining? So it would be 402 with Ms. Bagley Jones and myself abstaining. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. Ms. Gormley.
Thank you, Chairman Pavlicek. My report will be short tonight because we'll be moving on to the budget. Briefly sent in from the schools tomorrow night, December 2nd. You heard Ms. Hannah tonight at the Milton High School. There'll be a cabaret talent show at 7 o'clock. You could be living in the Milton Public Schools during the month of December, day and evening and weekends. December 2nd, Friday night, the Pierce has asked me to remind the public and invite the public. The PTO has a shopping night from 6 to 9. I think this might have started with you, Mr. Phelan, in the Pierce Cafeteria as a fundraiser, but it is an unbelievably successful evening for the Pierce School, and it's open to the public. December 3rd, Ms. Kelly's son is involved with this event. The Pierce Robotics team, I love, they refer to themselves as the Mooseheads, Ms. Kelly?
The Mooseheads is correct.
Will be participating in the Lego League competition from 8 to 3 at North Quincy High School. Then we start next week on December 2nd, the Milton High School Winter Concert at 7 o'clock. December 7th, Ms. Bagley Jones reminded us, will be the Milton High School Guidance Financial Aid Night for individuals with seniors at Milton High School. A very important night. We'd encourage the parents and guardians of every senior at Milton High School or a junior who wants to start to get prepared. A very informative night on financial aid when students, parents and guardians are planning for their children to go off to university. That's in the auditorium. December 13th, another Milton High School winter concert in the auditorium. And the 14th and 15th will be Milton High School and Pierce Middle School winter concerts. The schools have asked for the public, parents, and guardians to watch the websites. The month is full of book fairs, clothing drives, toy drives. Miss Sheridan took off the wall a poster on her way up. The schools all have events at Barnes & Noble Book Fair. Mr. Pavlicek must have been a consumer. He said, you know, Ms. Gormley, you go to the event, you buy the books, and a profit from each book, a portion of the sale will go to the individual school. So on Thursday, December 1st, tomorrow night, if you shop at Barnes & Noble between 5 and 7 and mention Milton High School, a portion of the sale of the book will go to the Milton High School Library. So we'll check all the individual schools, make sure they're having their nights, and post those on the web. We're going to go on to the budget tonight. One more letter that we just received in the mail, and it was in between our meetings. Last year, our recently formed Milton Visual Arts Alliance group of parents advocating for art in the Milton Public Schools wrote to our office, and last Sunday, the Milton Visual Arts Alliance had their second annual Caring Kids event at the Milton Public Library. If you would indulge me, this event was a great success. They simply reached out to families who brought their children, and the children made over 200 heartful cards, which will be hand-delivered by the MVAA and the children to seniors living at Unquity House, Winter Valley, and Fuller Village. And if you go to the web, we have on our website a link to see the pictures of this event. They have sponsors for the event, And I have to say that this partnership, these reaching out and making these cards last year from really all of the children in Milton, from the children who attend all of the schools in Milton, public, private, and parochial, reaching out to the senior citizens around the holiday. I have to recognize MVAA. These cards and symbols of appreciation made a difference to many senior citizens who live in our community. So I'm going to, we had a site council scheduled, the PS Site Council, but they asked to be rescheduled to later, your next date in December. So in December, we have the Pierce and the Tucker Site Council presenting on their strategic plans. So I'm going to defer to our later presentation on the budget. Thank you.
Okay. And we'll move into my report. First off, we have the evaluation of the superintendent. As you'll remember, 2 meetings ago, as required by the process laid out in both general laws and the open meeting law, we went around the table and people gave their thoughts on the superintendent's performance over the last year. I wrote that up into a document, circulated it for comment. There was one suggested correction, and that's reflected in the document that you received today. Rather than my reading it all, we will just go ahead and post it, assuming it's voted. So I will entertain a motion to accept the this summary of evaluation of the superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Walker, seconded by Ms. Kelly. Any comments, discussion on this?
I'd just like to commend you on an excellent job of taking 6 different perspectives, including your own, and creating a coherent document that accurately reflects, I think, what we all think about Mary's performance.
Agreed.
So I will move to a vote then. All those in favor of approving the evaluation of the superintendent? It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Second item under my report is the Town Government Study Committee. The Board of Selectmen have moved to create a committee of 7 members to study town government, including, as their motion states, a member with background in private sector management, a member with background in public administration, a member from the Warrant Committee, a member from the School Committee or School Administration, and a member from the general public, all of whom shall be taxpayers of the town of Milton and shall serve 1-year terms. The committee shall study the operations and structure of all departments and offices of town government, with its goal being to recommend changes, if any, that would affect economics or increase efficiency, included but not limited to the form of town government in Milton, potential benefits from regionalization of certain town services or town departments, potential benefits of enhanced technology to improve operating efficiency and service, and consolidation of certain operations and/or departments within town government. The committee shall submit a written report to the Board of Selectmen by December 1st of each year. Since we are mentioned in this as either the school committee or the school administration as having a member on there, I would solicit volunteers. I know Mr. Walker has contacted me with interest. Does anyone else have interest in serving, representing us in this committee? Ms. Kelly?
I'm not raising my hand to offer, although it sounds like it would be fun. I'm just wondering, is this a representative from the school committee, or is this a school committee member? Because to me, that means 2 different things. If it's the representative from the school committee or the school administration, it should be representing the school committee or school administration's views, and therefore discussions sort of need to happen along the way, along the process.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just the appointment of a school committee member, then I think the member comes to the committee with their own personal opinions. So I'm not sure
The
what
language of their vote was a member from the school committee or school administration. That was the language from their actual motion at the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
So I take it to mean just either one of us or someone from the school department. I would certainly expect that person would be talking with us about what is going on at that meeting, although they're not required to represent us from that language, but I think we would expect to be updated as things went along. So, Seeing only one volunteer. Yeah, Miss.
Not volunteering, and I appreciate Mr. Walker volunteering. But because it is, I guess I'm thinking about what Ms. Kelly said, because it is a school committee member, it just seems to me it should either be as a private citizen or representing the school committee. I know their language doesn't say that, but wouldn't it be also up to us? Just like when, Dennis, you went to the thing that you're going to report on, you didn't represent yourself, you represented all of us.
That was clearly representing the school committee. It was
Right,
the school
but I'm
committee
asking,
voted, the Mass Association of School Committees.
Is it up to them or is it up to us?
Well, the Board of Selectmen created the committee by their vote. It's a committee that reports to them. They've charged it, and they're requesting a member, as I quote, a member from the school committee or administration.
As the volunteer, might I comment?
Please.
I don't see how you can separate the two. I think whoever the individual is from the school committee would have to represent the interest of the school committee and the schools. I mean, why else would they be on there?
Ms. Gallagher.
Which is why I raised the point. So I think just, thinking about it, there needs to be a process that as you progress through whatever the process is intended to be, that it comes back here, that there's full discussion, and then I guess the committee would vote to sort of how to move forward. And especially the fact, it'd be one thing if they were talking about something that has nothing to do with what we do, which is part of town government. But the fact that they are entertaining the possibility of restructuring, et cetera, one would think that the school committee would want to have a voice in that process, rather than waiting till the end and having whatever comes out sort of be not as intended. So.
Ms. Megan Jones.
I actually think I agree with Ms. Kelly and also with Mr. Walker. I think it's a great thing. You have a lot of skills to bring into this area particularly. But I also wonder about the school administration, and not that I'm looking for more help, more work for you to do, but how does their perspective get brought into it as well?
I think it comes through the member that we appoint.
Right. So just making that point, that if that's comfortable for the process to happen with that would be helpful, I think.
Mr. Walker.
And I just think one of the first orders of business for the committee itself would be the town government study committee would be to talk about how it's going to organize itself, what kinds of report outs it's going to do, so that we can reconcile making sure that the bodies they represent are informed and that public discussions occur at the right time.
I would entertain a motion to appoint Mr. Walker as our representative to the Town Government Study Committee.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Bagley Jones, seconded by Mr. Kaye. Any further discussion? Mr. Walker, would you accept the appointment? I should
Yes, I
ask you
will.
that.
Gladly.
Too late now.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? That is unanimous, thank you. And the final item under my report is a report from the Mass Association of School Committees annual meeting. Mr. Kahane represented us at that, and we had charged him on some votes, and so it would be nice to find out how it all went. So, turn to you.
This is what I call my second annual vacation to the Cape. And this year there were 5 resolutions, and we took a vote on each of the resolutions at the last school committee meeting. And this is how it worked out. Resolution number 1, which was providing greater access for students to visit state-approved vocational educational programs. We voted not to support it. It was approved. The second resolution was the teacher evaluation. We also voted not to support this, and it was also approved. The third resolution was the charter school funding, which we voted to approve as well, and this was approved. Resolution number 4, we had a split vote, 3-3, and the resolution, this was an enactment of a freeze on No Child Left Behind. And this was pretty contentious down there, but it was approved after much discussion. And the last resolution was the state educator evaluation process. And we voted to approve it, and it was approved. I also took one course on health and wellness, obesity in the schools, which is rampant right across the country. And they were trying to find out solutions to rectifying the problem. And I got up and I actually spoke for 5 minutes on our food service industry here in Milton. And I asked them to go on the website. And that afternoon I met a woman who actually checked out the website and said that she will be contacting our superintendent. She was amazed at the food we were distributing to our children. So
That's great.
it was very successful. And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walker.
First, Mr. Cohen, that doesn't sound like a vacation, so thank you for representing us. In terms of next steps, so for those resolutions that are approved, which of those might require either legislation or changes in the State Department of Education's regulations? I mean, what are the next steps now that those have been approved?
I'm not sure what the next steps are, to be honest.
Okay.
Generally, the MASC takes them on as part of their legislative program. They take that as the vote of the membership to
That's what I thought.
to follow
So-
forward that way.
The fact that they're approved simply means they'll pursue it, but nothing will change at the moment.
Right, no, it becomes part of their legislative agenda
Okay.
with their lobbying efforts.
If I could just say one thing about resolution number 3, which was the charter school funding. When we voted on it, Ms. Kelly, you opposed it. You expressed concern that changing the mechanism by reducing the bottom line of state aid could have the potential to negatively impact Milton. And that was actually a bone of contention down there as well with a lot of people. And so they amended they approved the resolution with an amendment to state that no changes or fees or reduction of state aid to education affect any city or town or regional district. So you were right on there.
Ms. Sheridan?
Well, I was just going to say, if that had been in the original topic that we
all
had
might
to
have
negotiate, we all might have supported it.
Right.
so.
Right.
Well, that is one of the
Good
issues
work.
with the MASC convention, is that once discussion happens and amendments do happen, sometimes these change and shift a little bit on the fly. So it's sometimes hard to tell a week or two in advance of the actual event by just reading the proposal, exactly how it's going to play out and how it's eventually going to end up. Because as often as not, they don't end up as a simple yes or no vote to the resolution on the floor. All right, well, that concludes the items on my report, so we can move into the principal business for tonight, which is the Finance Subcommittee's initial report on FY13 budget proposal. So I will turn it to Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlicek. We have been charged with creating the FY13 budget and submitting it to the warrant committee, actually by tomorrow, I believe is the date. So we're taking it right to the wire. What we've asked the administration to do is to take the present services that we provide this year and roll it forward to FY13 with whatever contractual obligations or estimates in increased energy costs, et cetera, would be necessary to do and provide the same services we do this year, next year. In order to do that, the administration came up with the number of, just to do the same services we do today, to do it next year would be $35,739,719. Our obligation, and the warrant committee has asked us to do this, is to say, what if you were to get level dollars? And that requires the administration to go through many hours of deliberation with the leadership team and basically target what is a $1.7 million gap between the funding we have today for FY12 and what we would need to do the same services next year. So at this point, I would ask the administration to go through, unfortunately, what is a substantial presentation on the cuts that would be necessary to meet that level dollar obligation.
Mrs. Kelly, I would ask any school committee member or John Phelan or Matt Gillis to enter in any time in this presentation.
Can I jump,
course.
interrupt you for a moment here, too?
Please do.
Just as, by way of introduction to this, for the last several years, we have been asked to provide a level dollar budget to the warrant committee because the last several years have been very tight in terms of additional revenue and so forth. So this has become their standard, basically, for starting the budget process. And I think it's important to note that this year is not last year or the year before in terms of a variety of different things. At the warrant committee meeting I was at 2 weeks ago, or I think it was 2 weeks ago now, they were looking at increased revenues for next year over this year on the order of $2.2 million is their initial estimate. And that doesn't include any changes in state aid. So if state aid were to go up, and with state revenues surpassing all their benchmarks for last year, that is a possibility. We are not looking at a $0 scenario. The other piece is, in the past, much of that initial Proposition 2.5 extra revenue has gone to things like healthcare. And as we all know, we've just signed a healthcare memorandum with all the unions in the town, so that instead of seeing healthcare going up next year, we are looking at a potentially $1 million decrease in healthcare costs for next year, and that's not reflected in the $2.2 million figure that the warrant committee was talking about. So I think, although this is our starting point and this is what we've been charged to do, I think it's very important to note that, this is a worst case scenario in every sense of that word, and I think it's a much less likely scenario than it has been over the last couple of years, just given the fact that there is money out there to be allocated in the fiscal 13 budget, but as they're going forward, they've asked for this level as an initial spot. So, we've sat here and wrung our hands about what would happen if we got $0 over the last couple of years, and we've come pretty close to getting $0 over some of those years. I think at least a grain of salt should be taken with this particular discussion tonight, because I'm certainly hopeful it is much less likely than it has been in prior years. I think that looking at cut the severity of $1.7 million from level service is horrible. As we will see that it's horrible, there's no question about it. But I think it's also horrible, but not completely likely. That's my personal opinion on that. So, Ms. Gorman.
I think Ms. Kelly and Mr. Pavlicek did the job that I would have done better leading into this process. And so, to reiterate one more time, this is a process. And Leroy Walker served in the warrant committee and was the chairperson of the school subcommittee, and reminded us that this is a process. This lap of the process will go until that last Saturday in February, where the warrant committee, excuse me?
It's the first Saturday.
First Saturday in February, where the warrant committee has their full day deliberations. They look at their revenue, and then they look at each budget, and they make their budget recommendations. And so we did a tremendous amount of internal discussion around, we felt such a responsibility about developing this budget. You heard Ms. Hannah at the beginning of the meeting, but we were charged by the warrant committee, and we've been charged every year. And by December 1st, as Ms. Kelly said, tomorrow, what would the Milton Public Schools look like if you were given the same number of dollars? And this is a process that we go through every single year. We don't do it to frighten people, to scare people. This system works. This warrant committee in this town, very frugally responsible, and we must go through this process. We take this seriously. I approached the Finance Subcommittee and School Committee and said, should we use a plug number? And we followed the directions of the Warrant Committee. What would the Milton Public Schools look like if we gave you the same number of dollars next year? So we're going to proceed with the work. The other night, I presented to the PTO presidents, and then yesterday, Matt Gillis, John Phelan, and I presented to the staff. And we said that this was a draft. We collaborate with the Finance Subcommittee. We meet every Monday morning. We collaborate with the School Committee. Drafts go back and forth. But we meet as a leadership team, the principals, the SPED director, Matt, John, and I, and we spend a tremendous amount of time. I said to the staff and the PTO presidents, last year we had 2 new principals. Their reaction to this process was, we were just appointed, and now we're supposed to talk about letting teachers go. But we take this process very, very seriously. It's completely transparent. Every dollar is accounted for. So I'm going to walk you through this presentation with John Phelan and Matt Gillis. It will be posted tomorrow as a standalone document, and I would ask anyone at any time who has any questions to just stop us. Again, this is the cover page. To Ms. Kelly's point, $35,739,719, $35 million, that's the number to move the system ahead next year. No new program, no new people, no new staff members. And I just want to interrupt myself here. When we start this process, we have some non-negotiables. Again, we've developed what we think is an outstanding special education program over the years. We have aspects of that program, non-negotiables. We have programs within the school that we, our cost savings, again, all of our programs are outstanding for our students, but we look at some that are non-negotiable. We just went through the reaccreditation at the high school. We're looking for the report to come back in February. There are aspects of your high school program that are non-negotiable. One is a high school librarian. NEASC will call systems short if they don't have a high school librarian. So we have non-negotiables. But this $35 million is moving the system ahead with the same amount of people. Then last year, our budget was $34 million. The difference, Ms. Kelly said, $1,710,000, $376. All right, so now this $1,700,000 is broken into contractual obligations for level service, salary increases, the $1,500,000, and then other draft non-salary increases, $120,000, totaling the $1.7 million. The public will remember, the school committee will remember, that in past years, this non-salary number, I've seen that number go up to close to $1 million, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. But with the efforts that you have heard about at this table on energy savings from the facilities subcommittee, Matt Gillis and the leadership team at central office with the school committee working, we've brought that number down. So we look at that $1.7 million, and we have to think, again, we've given this charge. We are responsible for the operation of the Milton Public Schools. If we had to eliminate, if we had to run with the same number of dollars, how would we, what would that 1.7 look like in cuts and reductions? So we've divided those reductions and cuts after long deliberations into what we call 2 tiers. First, a non-salary reduction total of $295,000, and then a salary FTE reduction subtotal of $1.4 million, totaling that $1.7 million. Again, this document will be on the web tomorrow, and I stress to you that this is a draft. I want to explain that we presented, again, to the PTO presidents and the staff, so when the viewing public or individuals who live and work in the Milton Public Schools go to work tomorrow, we wanted the staff who will be impacted by these possible cuts to know before somebody hears it on the cable television show. So we've We now have dates in January at each of our schools, each of the 6 schools, for the school committee and leadership team to go out to present to the local PTOs and the parents. My experience in the last 2 years have been that the school committee goes out and they hear the parents and guardians, they listen to their input, and in finance subcommittee and school committee, this is a draft. We make actual changes. So I want to stress to everyone that this is a draft, but it's the best work from the leadership team, again, consulting with the finance subcommittee and the school committee. I would ask you to then go to the next page. We've done this outline. We are now going to outline the non-salary reductions for you that total the $295,000. I'm going to ask Matt Gillis to quickly go over this list, and then for every one of these items, we've created with the leadership team an impact statement. So Matt, do you want to summarize this page for the school committee and the public?
Sure. The first bucket that we look at is the non-salary expenses, where we can make reductions or have cost savings because people provide the services to our students. So the first one that is on this list is increase the bus fee, $50 per student. And then the topic there, reoccurring savings, yes, because we can keep charging the fee each year. Projected reduction based on the number of riders that pay, about $25,000. Cost code is soft because the school committee would have to vote to approve an increase in that fee for next year. And that's a plug number because whenever you change fees, there's the chance that some people might reach their price breaking point and say, in that case, I'm not going to buy. Next one, reduce the number of buses from 10 to 9. We're studying that at this point, as well as potential time changes in how we deliver regular ed transportation at the first meeting yesterday. Contracted services and tuition for our special ed program, making boiler or burner modifications to be more efficient with our use and consumption of heat. The amount we charge back to the folks that rent our facilities, to the facilities rental budget for the use of heat. And last but not least, an off-site solar farm, which if it gets off the ground soon, it will be operational come this time to next January next year. So that partial year savings would be about $125,000 from our electric budget.
So that totals the $295,000. Again, this is a standalone document on the web tomorrow. The leadership team has spent a tremendous amount of time with the impact statements. We have an area where people can, citizens can ask questions, and we'll get back to them. We keep a running list of the questions on our site. So that really, the impact statements for Tier 1.
So the first one for instructional services, if we increase the bus fee, like I said, it may result in lower participation, and $25,000 doesn't even cover the cost of one bus by itself. Second one, reducing the number of buses from 10 to 9. In order to do that and still get the kids to school and home in a timely manner so that we can pick them up for dismissal, we would in all likelihood have to change the start and or dismissal times to make that work. For special education, the changes in the contracted services and the out-of-district tuitions are two different line items, but really the whole budget that the special ed director has to work with to provide services that we can't provide in-house. So that's about $3.6 million, and we believe there's $44,000 worth of efficiencies that can be found in that budget. Change the facilities, boiler and burner modifications to equipment. We do that before this year is over, and we expect to save about 5 to 7% on our heat budget.
And Mr. Gillis, the other night, the PSPTO president asked if that's a boiler modification in one school or in all 6 schools.
Probably be in all 6 schools. Facilities, again, facilities rental revolving fund charge a little bit more rent back for the heat consumption, and that would lower the fund balance that we use in the maintenance rental revolving funds to provide custodial service and maintenance to the buildings. I think you've probably heard me say it before, but our auditorium, the taxpayer has never actually paid for any maintenance to that auditorium. All of the supplies and any overtime work or anything that our folks do there, or vendors that come in to fix things, we charge directly to the revolving fund from all the folks that like to rent our auditorium. And last but not least, the 3 megawatt solar farm, which would be about 75-80% of our electricity, would be produced from the solar farm, and at about a 38 to 40% discount from the price we're paying now. Again, the contract's not finalized. Nobody in the state has yet built one, got one built off-site. We're kind of in a race with Plymouth to see who gets it done first, with a little friendly competition there. But we hope to be able to get that squared away in the near future. And again, that's $295,000 in the non-salary reductions. And next up, we have, actually, we're going back to Mary for the elementary school.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Gillis. So we go to Tier 2, the salary FTE reductions, which will total the $1.4 million to get to level funding. Again, bringing the public back to the charge was, if you are given the same number of dollars, we moved the system ahead to that $35 million number. We had to get back to the same number of dollars, $34 million from last year, so the cuts would result in $1.7 million. So this salary FTE reduction tier would total $1.4 million, and Mr. Phelan's going to outline that for us now.
System-wide, we wanted to give a picture before we go into each level of detail for elementary, middle, and high school and district-wide. These reductions that we're about to explain will be 26.5 teachers, or FTEs, as we call them in the public school system. We will outline the details behind the district-wide reductions, elementary, middle, and high school, with impact statements that the leadership team has come up with, as this document, again, will stand alone by itself on the web for parents to view.
I'll start with the elementary. No, well, first we're going to do district-wide. District-wide, so we've separated, going back, we've separated these 26.5 positions into district-wide, elementary, middle, and high school. No prioritization of any of the positions, the total number being the 1.4. First, district-wide, to bring us to level funding. First, a reduction of special educational assistance. Last year, I want to remind the public and the school committee that we looked at the aides in our full-day kindergarten classes. And as a cost savings, I had recommended reducing those aides to 0.5 or half-time. And again, the school committee, listening to the parents of those students and us working collaboratively, we reduced the full-day kindergarten aides to 0.8. And the program is working efficiently, effectively, and flourishing with those 0.8, those aides being at a 0.8. We have a budget in the Milton Public Schools of these educational assistants of, Mr. Gillis, approximately $1.4 million. And again, working with the leadership team and the SPED director and the principals, if we look at all of the educational assistants in the district and we're able to maximize the entire day of those educational assistants, if an educational plan reads classroom aid, we use those aids during when the students have art, music, library, and gym. In another classroom, I believe by looking system-wide and looking at every single schedule, we would be able to make a 6.0 FTE cut totaling $140,000. The next cut would be a special education related service cut in the form of a 1.0 FTE. I'm going to run through them and then go to the impact statements. The next would be an anticipated staffing change in overtime for custodians. The next would be an administrative reorganization, days and duties. And the last in this district-wide would be a preschool teacher supervisor. All of those positions totaling $295,000, 7.5 FTEs. In the impact statements, I just went over the first, the educational assistants. Again, a reduction of 0.6, looking at every schedule of every instructional aid assistant system-wide. The next We have, in the special ed services, we have students that receive speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We have these service providers system-wide. And years ago, each of these individuals would be assigned to a building. We now have these individuals teamed to different buildings, but we try to maximize their time so that the traveling between buildings doesn't eat into what is their service time. So we believe looking system-wide at all of these service providers, looking at the models that we have pushing in rather than pulling out students, we'll be able to cut on one FTE totaling $57,000. Next, we're in contract negotiations with our custodians, and we believe that we are going to be able to secure a $30,000 savings in, with our custodians in overtime being reduced. The next would be another negotiation with the administration reorganization, and it would result in a loss of supervision time provided for by our leadership team, our principals and Unit B members, vice principals, directors, department heads, providing the important supervision and evaluation to our teachers. That would be an identified savings of $40,000, and the impact would be loss of supervision. The next, a .5 teacher supervisor. At this point, at this time, we have a 1.0 individual who supervises our preschool, a teacher who supervises our preschool program at the Collycott Cunningham site. Very, very successful preschool program with children with special needs and role models. If we reduce that position in half at a savings of $28,000, those district-wide savings will total $295,000. And that will total 7.5 FTE.
I just want to comment on the line that says reorg OT reduced.
Yes?
That, on the previous page, you identify that as being custodial, but it's not
It is.
identified there.
All right, so
you
we'll
might
put that
wanna
in.
Just add that into that line, either in negotiation with custodian
Excellent.
union, or
Yep.
it might be misconstrued.
Excellent. And again, these are all individuals. The overtime, but all of the rest of the individuals have full-time positions in the Milton Public Schools. They're working, servicing the students in the Milton Public Schools in very important roles. These are cuts, reductions, and eliminations we don't want to make, but when you're charged with what would the system look like if you were given the same number of dollars and you had to make $1.7 million in cuts, these are the difficult decisions that would impact students in teaching and learning in the Milton Public Schools. Next.
Just one footnote, the educational assistants, that would not impact our full-day K educational assistants. We believe we've optimized the efficiency of the program by going from a 1.0 to a 0.8, and from what we hear from the staff and the silence of the parents and the students, that this is working very well. So this proposed change, if had to be implemented, would not affect the full-day K program.
And these are very different, if I might.
Yeah.
These are very different group. The educational assistants, the special educational assistants are a very different group than the FDK, the full-day kindergarten educational assistants. But again, we respond to the questions asked by the public, and the PTO asked that excellent question the other night, so that's why we made the clarifying statement. Again, and also, when we were preparing this, I said some of these should have asterisks next to them, because if you cut a teacher, you cut a teacher. But some of these we're not sure that they can be completed if we can achieve these goals, because these educational assistants are per IEPs. And we're committed to meet the educational needs of every single student and meet those IEPs. Again, it would be a goal to try to look at every single schedule. Mr. Pelliccia?
Ms. Kelly?
So going to the district-wide sped position, I guess the comments that you just made about, we have individual education plans or contracts between the families and the Milton Public Schools, and we are obligated to provide those services. So what you're looking at here is efficiencies. I almost think that maybe that note, maybe a note at the end of that with IEPs will be.
Absolutely.
Just so that we're sure about that. In the loss of supervision time for the admin reorg, is that supervision of both students and teachers?
No, it would be, a good question, and that should be a clarifying remark. That'll be loss of supervision and evaluation of teachers and staff,
Okay, but not of students?
not of students.
Okay. And then if we could just expand a little bit on the reduction of the preschool supervision coordination. Again, in the preschool, many of our students are students with IEPs, and maybe this is where you would highlight that we are definitely going to fulfill our our contract on those. But what does this look like? What's the impact on teaching and learning?
When we discuss that as a leadership team, what's the impact on the other, this individual serves as the SPED chair for that, mini school. And so would some of the caseload have to be reassigned? What's the equity among the schools to have someone on site there working with when children turn 2, bringing families in, getting their individual plans ready for when they turn 3 to get into that preschool. And we've seen miracles occur when children are in that preschool and their special needs are they're provided for at that early age. So you're absolutely right. None of these are positions that aren't needed and aren't individuals working full-time and benefiting teaching and learning in the Milton Public Schools. Now we go on to the elementary salary personnel reductions. The school committee, the public, and especially elementary parents were very articulate last year. They understood. The first 2 eliminations would be an English reading teacher, a 1 FTE, and the French reading teacher. I would bring you back, as I said to the audience yesterday, that if you called your relatives and friends who lived in other communities, they have reading teachers in the elementary schools. Reading teachers are assigned primarily to the primary grades, and they work and provide service to individual students and small groups of students, and often, again, I got ahead of myself. Let me read the list and then go to the impact statements. On this elementary list, the English reading teacher, French reading teacher, teacher specialists, which I'll detail, 2 FTEs at $114,000, a grade 2 teacher, a grade 4 teacher, eliminate all elementary clubs at $8,500, eliminate a SPED teacher, eliminate a custodian. The total cuts at the elementary would be 7.5, totaling $430,000. Let me detail those cuts for you and eliminations. As I was saying, that the English reading teacher and the French reading teacher, we have 1 English reading teacher and 1 French reading teacher that service all our elementary schools, our 4 elementary schools. There is an additional part-time person who services grades 1 and 2 at the Tucker, because the Tucker is a Title I school. Again, the impact statements read, will result in compromised early intervention and diminished response to intervention. Remediation has potential for eliminating the need for special education service. As an elementary person, I know that when you have these reading specialists, these reading teachers in your 1st and 2nd grades, many times the identified reading issues, language issues can be remediated, and students do not have to have an IEP and begin with special education services. These are 2 valuable positions. The parents, the public understand the value of these positions, but when you look at a $1.7 million cut and you're looking at really actually at the other 2 levels, and we're going to get into this level, going into the teacher in front of the children, there are no extra positions in the Milton Public Schools and the elementary schools. Again, those are the only 2 reading teachers other than the Title I teacher at the Tucker School that's by law because of the funding that Tucker gets. The next cut will be 2 FTEs, part-time positions. We will eliminate elementary strings, band, ACE, future problem solving, and we will reduce and return grades 4 and 5 art to 30 minutes per week. This literally means that the students will have the art, music, library, and physical education. We're going to do an impact page over the last 5 years, what that has been reduced to. But again, when you're looking at $1.7 million of cuts, all of the part-time, the music, the individual who does the strings in each school, band, future problem solving, ACE, and again, the parents know how much time went into working with the schedule, using the same individuals that we have on staff, educators, and we eliminated 1 librarian last year, and we increased the art, having a library open with a certified librarian every other week, and students exchanging books with an aide on the off week. So that's a very, very difficult cut at the elementary school. This next cut, a grade 2 teacher, and a grade 4 teacher. What these 2 eliminations will mean, in the French immersion program, we all understand that at first grade the classes start at 26 because new individual families moving into the Milton Public Schools after grade 1, unless they come from a French-speaking background, do not enter into the French immersion program. So students moving into the district, which happens in Milton quite often, move into the English program. So in our neighboring communities and communities you want to be compared with, there are first grades and kindergartens that are 18, 17, 20. So we started our current first grades at the Cunningham and the Glover. We have low class size numbers, under 20. If we have to cut $1.7 million, we're going to have to raise those numbers to 25, and students are going to have to move to the Tucker and the Collycott School in the 2nd grade. Children that already enrolled in the 1st grade in the Cunningham and Glover will leave the existing class strand, and we'll increase the number to the 25, or as high as we have to, and then we'll move the children to other buildings. This isn't something that I've ever done or want to do, but again, if you look at the elementary class size that we're going to attach the enrollment chart to the end of this presentation, you'll see at your elementary schools you have no classes except at these 2 levels where there are classes under 20. At the current grade 3 at the Glover School, there are 2 classes in English that have under 20 for class size. We would have to leave 1 class, fill it to the maximum cap, which is 25 at the 3rd grade, and then have other children move to the other 3 schools in town. Again, I've never done anything like this, move children after they begin in a school, but again, $1.7 million of cuts, and you're looking at a school district. Those are the only class sizes at the elementary, under 20. You understand about clubs and activities at the middle school and high school. I would share with you, when Dr. Aranjo came back to Milton High School, he said to me, how did we ever get in the situation that we charge students for clubs? And when now he's gone through this process to see how difficult it is, when you really prioritize bell to bell. So we have an array of clubs at the middle and high school. We charge the students and their families. At the elementary, there are 2 clubs at each school, and we would eliminate all elementary enrichment and remedial after-school clubs. We would eliminate all elementary school clubs. They wouldn't even be for fee. A SPED teacher. The elimination of 1 SPED teacher at the elementary school would result in less individualized instruction. Again, we'd have to look at the schedules district-wide, look at every individual student's IEP, whether we have to group students differently or around their needs with the resource teachers. So again, that's one of those cuts that we would have to look at to be sure that we could achieve. We would also eliminate at the elementary level a .5 custodian. Again, over the last years, Mr. Gillis, we've eliminated how many custodians?
Just one the last 2 years, but before that, we eliminated another.
So we've eliminated custodians. We would eliminate a .5 custodian. And as I said to the public yesterday, more square footage to be cleaned by the remaining custodial staff. When you are charged with creating these cuts, you look at every level. You look at the administrative level, you look at the teacher level, you look at the administrative assistant level, you look at the custodian level. We took a cut in the business office last year that took us into the school year to achieve because we had to reassign all of the duties and make sure that, again, with the $35 million organization, that every part of the budget was being attended to. So at the elementary, if we ever had to make these cuts, the FTE total would be 7.5 teachers, totaling $430,000. And that would seriously impact your elementary program, your 4 elementary schools, as would the cuts on the previous page that are district-wide and preschool.
Ms. Kelly?
So, Ms. Gormley, you talked about having another sheet or something that would give a little bit more definition to the impact. I guess what I'm asking is for the music, art, ACE, strings, band, and future problem solving, what do we have now and what would it end up being? So some of these you're definitely saying eliminating. But art, I'm not sure where we're at, so.
That's a good request, Mr. McGillis, you have that down? We're going to, we'll detail what that will mean, and I have to tell you, the backup for this budget, what we've actually gone over, the FTEs, and I believe it was, the PTOs asked, the PTO presidents asked, and again, what part of a full-time person does the strings in each of our 4 elementaries during lunch and recess? What part of an FTE does ACE in our 4 elementary schools? The future problem-solving person that travels to all 4 schools is between a .3 and a .4 FTE. We have the exact count of moving the art to 30 minutes, back to 30 minutes from 45 minutes. To remind the public, the parents came to the school committee last year. We met regularly with the parents advocating for this change, and at grades 4 and 5, to have only 30 minutes when you're working with clay and the kind of art projects 4th and 5th graders do, it's a period that really can't be very effective, 30 minutes. So that's why we moved it to 45 minutes. But we'll detail what that cut means. So again, 7.5 teachers at the elementary, totaling $430,000.
Ms. Sheridan?
If you're going to provide backup on that, Ms. Gormley, it would be helpful to say specifically what the elementary enrichment and remedial after-school clubs are.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And they're different at each school.
Ms. Kelly?
So this is where I just want to make my comment about the fact that we have 2 reading teachers on here, but foreign language remains untouched. Additionally, I will point out, this is the first time I think that I can remember that we started talking about moving children and we're only targeting the English program. Both of those situations are very troubling. Additionally, the fact that we're talking about cutting back on music, art, strings, ACE, et cetera, and foreign language still remains untouched. I think at some point it's important to put on the table what the non-negotiables are. And if foreign language is non-negotiable at the elementary level, I think we need to talk about that publicly. Again, our basic mandate as a school system is to provide those basics that will allow a child to move on in life. I would have to imagine that reading is one of the primary ones, and that's our obligation. If we believe as a system that the English reading teacher and the French reading teacher are, a core part of our delivering on that mandate, then I think that we should prioritize foreign language on this cut sheet as opposed to having it being totally off.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Pegler.
When, Mary, when you talk about the English grade 2 students, I know as the kids go up in grades in the French program, the numbers definitely decrease, so.
There are no classes under 20, though, in French immersion system-wide.
So what would they be, so if they're under 20, English or French, they would be combined, that's my point. It wouldn't just be English would be combined or moved, it would be any class under 20 or whatever the number is would be moved.
And
Correct?
to Mrs. Kelly and Ms. Bagley Jones's point, we had a Tucker French immersion class that was similar to these numbers, and it always came up as a possible cut to eliminate that and to have the children move to the other 3 schools. And I've never moved children. Again, at the elementary level, at the level, leadership level, when Mr. Phelan once said, you know, at the elementary level, you really have cut all around the edges. And I said, because I've been here. And so because I was an elementary person and I was leading this, we've brought back the elementary. Again, there is nowhere to cut. And we've got our core classroom teacher in front of the children. And to Ms. Kelly and Ms. Bagley Jones's point, not setting up the English against the French, when we had this class at the Tucker School, we always wanted to leave at least one strand. If we had taken those, one year it was 18, one year it was 14 children, it would have eliminated a 4th grade or a 5th grade at the Tucker School in that language. These 2 cuts, again, they're the only classes that are under the 20. They would leave 1 class at the school. So there are currently now 2 English classes. There would be 1 English class, but the other children would move. Again, we've never put anything like this, moving children up. But when you have to get, you know, I brought the new administrators back to when the group was charged one year, the administrative team, they were going to close the Tucker School. I brought back the group to once when the charge was over $1 million, all athletics, we were going to work bell to bell, and all clubs and activities, no fees. We were going to eliminate the entire athletic program in our recent memory and all clubs. So again, when we start to work as a leadership team on this, you have to think, if you want to keep your bell to bell in your system intact, but to get to $1.7 million, it's not there in anybody that can be cut that's not working with children and valued. And so there are no cuts to total this that aren't going to, again, bring out audiences like tonight or the feedback from the school committee. No, I would be disappointed if I sat here and nobody replied to any of these cuts. And I don't believe Milton Public School parents are going to respond to this positively either. Again, I go back to Mr. Pavlicek's remarks when we started this. We almost begged, and we said, could we talk about just a number of teachers and wait a little bit longer and find out what the revenue's going to be and what our cut's going to be? Could we classify, and again, administrators, teachers, aides, custodians, and could we wait and find out what the cuts are going to be before we go through this exercise? But we respond to the warrant committee, they make the decisions, we've been transparent with them. We have a finance subcommittee that works and goes over this material with us, and we were given this charge, and this is what we've come forward with. So those are the cuts at the elementary school that are proposed at this time.
Ms. Kelly.
Sorry, just one more thing. On the elementary club advisors, the $8,500 is what's presently paid for out of the budget. But we also have some additional fee-based clubs?
Yeah, great point. And I have to tell you, in the spirit of equity, just like I spoke about clubs and activities when we were going to eliminate all clubs and activities, and there weren't going to be any clubs and activities even for fees, we would have to eliminate what's been created at the elementary schools, working through community schools. We've got even more than 2 clubs at each school, and some parents pay fee-based. We try to work under the umbrella and control the fees, Ms. Kelly, so that they're in line with our community schools. But in seeking equity and access for all children, we would have to eliminate all of those clubs and activities. But these are the clubs that are at each school. And again, we'll list what the clubs are. We don't say each school has to have, you know, an after-school grade 3, 4, and 5 MCAS support. The principal and the leadership team determines what the clubs and activities are going to be using those 2 club stipends at each school. Some of them are before school to facilitate families, but I'll list what the clubs are at each school. So those, that would, again, to put closure on this slide, 7.5 FTEs totaling $430,000 is the elementary subtotal. Moving on to the middle and high school, what the impact would be, again, bringing back the audience, if we were charged with making this level of cuts to the Milton Public Schools next year, and this is the proposed draft cuts that would have to be made. And Mr. Phelan's going to go over, my mistake on the last 2, the list, and then we'll go to the impact.
Sure. To bring you back, we've already done district-wide in the elementary reductions. At the middle and high school, we provided you a list of all the teachers at each of those schools that will be reduced. Librarian, health teacher, math teacher, French immersion teacher, English writing teacher, custodian, and a special educator at the middle school. At the high school, a Spanish teacher, a science teacher, an English teacher, an alternative education teacher, guidance counselor, a business teacher, and SAT prep during the school day and after the school day that has just been spoken about by Dr. Arangio last month at his presentation. At both schools, middle and high, there are, the library is open for students to access for homework clubs that provide a great service to our community and students, and that is out of the budget as well. It's not a paid club, it's free, and that would be eliminated as well. So to provide the impact behind each one of those reductions, the middle school impact would be at the library would be closed. This cut has been back and forth at the middle school over the past few years of budgetary concern. The librarian provides great assistance and support to the teachers in the classrooms through technical and web lessons that they provide. The teachers bring classes in the library each day. The library holds 3 classes at a time, and it's well utilized at Pearson. This would be a very substantial loss to a public school in a librarian. The health teacher that we have that works in each grade for the self-awareness and the health curriculum focused on middle school grades that we believe is essential. Member Cohane mentioned tonight that at the state level, at the retreat that he was at, that the concern for obesity and other social issues that revolve around health are very concerning to us as a public school. These reductions that may happen are hard to make, and this would be one hard reduction to make. The Pierce Middle School works very hard to ensure the success of all their students. Their scores in the aggregate, as James Jett will show next month or at the next meeting, are excellent, but our work with subgroups needs some additional support. In this math teacher, we have several of them that support students in the subgroups, and this position would be eliminated. We have enrollment in our French program, in our French, Spanish, and Latin, the languages at the middle school, and with the populations moving through the middle school, we may need to support another language and reduce the French program to possibly have the humanities piece of their program in grades 7 and 8 after school. We're not sure how that would look, and Principal Jett would like to speak with his staff and Dr. Martine Fisher, but there is the possibility that that reduction would mean that students wouldn't have that class during the school day, but possibly after school. In the 6th grade at Pierce, we have a writing class. We think it's a very essential piece to the students transitioning from elementary to middle. They have a regular reading class of 45 minutes a day and an additional writing class of 45 minutes a day. This prepares the students for the long comp in grade 7 and preparing them for high school rigor. And the loss of this teacher would mean that the team configuration would be probably impacted at grade 6, and that the increase in class size in all of these areas would increase as well. There is a .5 custodian that would be reduced at Pierce. And when we say out loud that the footage would have to be cleaned by other custodial staff, I think we should also say that the staff do a great job in our schools. Our custodians work very hard. We added a lot of square footage when we built these new schools, and we have reduced the amount of custodians since we built our new schools. They work very hard. The schools look incredible, and it'll be hard to keep the level of cleanliness to the expectation that I think our community deserves by reducing this position, this half position at Pierce and the other half position at the elementary level. The last reduction is in the special education teacher. This is a unique reduction. Right now, we have a language-based program at the elementary school that services grade 5 students. These grade 5 students are graduating this year to move on to the middle school. We anticipated using this special educator to support our co-taught program at the middle school and our language-based students at the middle school level. The co-taught program is now into the 7th and 8th grade, and we have team taught at the middle school. And we have carried these teachers through the elementary level and with that bubble population of students in special education programming into the middle school. So this will make it difficult for us to be able to maintain those programs to the degree that we would like. So that's an essential reduction as well. At the middle school, you will have a total of 6.5 FTEs and a total dollar amount of $364,500 in reductions. Any questions about the middle school before we go to the high school?
I have two, John. The first one is about the health teacher. So does that cut mean that there will no longer be health provided at any middle school grade level?
I think the PE department will decide if they only will run phys ed. When previous reductions like this have happened in the past, we've tried to provide some health through the PE class. So if I had PE for my 6th grade year or half of my 6th grade year, and I would have 25 PE classes, the PE staff would try to cull out 3 or 4 classes where they would go into a classroom and provide lessons. It's certainly not the comprehensive curriculum that we've had in the past, and even with this health teacher working, I would say the middle school students are not all getting a comprehensive health curriculum. So this is the last leg of health that we have available. Right now we have 3 health and wellness teachers, 2 phys ed, 1 health at the middle. When I was principal, we had 6 health and wellness teachers. Actually, 5.5. We had a half-time teacher that came down from the high school.
And at the elementary, when the students would have 2 phys ed class, 2 PE health classes, 1 PE class and 1 health class every week. And now the elementary students have 1 physical education class and no health.
So that's exactly where I was going with this, because I think we're coming very close to eliminating a program.
Mhm.
And we always try to look at our reductions in terms of eliminating programs. Is that in fact what's happening? So I just wanted to raise that up as an issue. And my second question was about the sped teacher cut at the bottom. If we are not able, with this cut, if we are not able to continue the language-based program at the middle school level, could that not possibly cost us more money in outside placements?
Well, as you know, the co-taught students are in the middle school in what we call the team taught program. We changed the name to reflect the change in the level of student from elementary to middle. This reduction will mean that with the increased enrollment of special education students in the co-taught and the language base that have flown up to the middle school, that have grown up to the middle school, these students have had in the past a team teaching experience in their math and their English at the middle school and all day at the elementary level. This next teacher was hopefully going to be the growing of that program to provide more assistance to those students in the other classes like science, like social studies. The parents are used to saying out loud, well, we hear in 5th grade meetings, well, why won't I have someone in all of my child's classes? Well, we're hoping that because they're getting to the middle school level, that they don't need that as much support, but some of them do. And we try to provide that support through aides in those classes of science and social studies. This teacher, moving forward with the enrollment bubble, we were hoping to try to reorganize how we deliver that service. And without that, we would probably have to turn back to using educational assistance for that service as well.
So there might still be a fee associated with that cut.
So could there be students that get outplaced because they feel the services aren't sufficient? Yes, that could be a possibility.
Or but even just putting in additional aides at that point.
That's correct.
I just wanted to.
And may I spin off that? I think that it would be valuable at a future presentation, if people remember years ago, when the Milton Public Schools decided to put in the co-taught program. Co-taught program, 2 teachers in a classroom, a cap of 18, with a smaller number of students with IEPs, individual educational plans. And Dr. Jaffoon's vision, I remember sitting here at the table, was that the program would be kindergarten through grade 3 in one school. And that program has grown, kindergarten through grade 5 at the Tucker and the Glover. And one class is running through the Collycott School. What that program has done has enabled families to keep their children in the Milton Public Schools where they want their children to attend. And again, the increase to our budget is really, when you think of it, 12 additional teachers. At the 5th grade, the teacher is part-time, not the full, whole 1 FTE. But again, the program has grown and it's successful. And then when we go to the middle school, these are the years we're working on, again, the success of the program, parents asking for their children, both in regular ed and special education, to be in this program. We're working to, again, create an equally successful model at the middle school. So those students will want to stay in the Milton Public Schools and remain in the Milton Public Schools, but it's a very high bar. And to Mr. Phelan's point, and working with all of the leadership and the teachers, again, the independence of moving to middle school and being able to work on your own and having the team approach, we're putting a tremendous amount of work to make sure that that model continues, succeeds, and flourishes at the middle school. So that would, this one teacher, eliminating one sped teacher with those students moving to the middle school, again, it's one of those positions we referred to, Ms. Kelly, would we be able to, again, achieve success for all students with that cut?
Any other questions on the middle school?
The whole thing.
Well, the middle school for right now, before Mary goes on to the high school.
I have one more comment. When I presented to the PTO, one of the PTO presidents said, well, I wouldn't say if you make that cut in French immersion at the middle school that you have a French immersion program anymore at the middle school. So again, we don't lay out every single discipline and say, well, we haven't cut anyone in math yet, or we haven't cut anybody in world language yet. We work on these reductions, and then when we're done, when we looked at it, we look as a system. Have we, the systems, we're looking at the 3 different levels, and if you look at this, there are cuts across all disciplines, and we do this as a team. I said to the teachers, we don't send James Jett back to the PS school and say, report in. Dr. Arangio, Dr. Spalding could do this presentation. When we make cuts like this and reductions, we do this as a system, because if you decided to cut art and music at the elementary and the high school, but leave it at the PS middle school. So there have to be decisions system-wide about where these reductions and where these cuts. We didn't take this exercise lightly, as you can see. I said before, we asked if we could not do this exercise, wait to do this exercise, do an abbreviated exercise. But again, the warrant committee asked, what would the Milton Public Schools look like if we weren't funded next year, fully funded? Moving ahead to the high school.
The last group is the high school. The first reduction with the impact statements would be the Spanish teacher. This would increase class size for all students who take Spanish. It also may be or result in the combining of upper level and advanced placement courses in one classroom, which may compromise the effectiveness of each of those programs. The science teacher reduction would increase class size for all students in all science classes. It would make it difficult for teachers to work individually with students, and it would, in some cases, make it difficult for every student to have an appropriate lab station, as 24 pupils in a class would dramatically increase the ability to do that in their working stations in a science class. In the English teacher reduction, we again would have high class size or higher class size in each of the English classes offered. In some of those classes within the department would be possibly eliminated. Electives in support classes, for example, drama, drama 2, debate, English 11 and 12 support were some of the ones mentioned by Dr. Arangio. The alternative education program teacher would be reduced by half. Right now, we have an alternative education program at the high school that services many students who would be either not in school or attending outside placement schools that do wonders in that room to keep kids in school and bring them back into a productive and graduating situation. And a reduction in that area would be difficult as well. The reduction in the guidance staff by 0.5 would bring us right to the brim of what the NEASC accreditation limit would be. If you remember, we had the report from NEASC by Dr. Arangio, and there are certain expectations that we are expected to follow. Dr. Arangio believes that by reducing a half of a guidance counselor would bring us right to that limit, but within the appropriate boundary. But again, as we have seen, our population is growing at all of our schools, and that would be a concern if our population did go up again at the high school. We have course offerings in the business program. The loss of this elective category, first of all, would be a loss of those types of classes in technology and business, and would result in higher class size in other electives that students would then have to choose to go into because those classes weren't available. Courses like economics, some of the word processing in machine technology classes would be up for elimination. Elimination in fall and spring SAT prep. Again, Dr. Arangio came to you this fall. He put a fall SAT prep in on Saturdays and after school. He wanted to grow that program next year to having 2 to 3 sessions before and after school, as well as trying to implement it during the school day. He believes that that reduction would be a very deep blow to our goal as a school system to provide support and scaffold students to the best of their ability in their performance on their SAT scores.
May I add one thing to that, Mr. Phelan? You heard the high school leadership team say the correlation from the prep program to increased SATs. So we have detailed this cut so that the SAT prep that runs during the day and the before and the after school, all the SAT prep would be eliminated. So this is elimination of the entire program. The in-class teacher, we took the actual salary of the teacher who does the in-class program, the before school and the after school part of the program that we pay for, even though we charge students, and that would eliminate the entire program at Milton High School.
In the last reduction, which happens at the middle school and the high school, is that each of those libraries are open after school until 3:30, 4 o'clock for our students to access with adult supervision and teacher support. It is well attended in both the middle school and the high school. It would be very sad to see that access and support and environment where students can come in and do their homework and converse in groups and get work done right here in their own school be eliminated. This results in 5.2 FTEs of teachers and $325,000. Again, as it has been pointed out on several occasions, this process, we hope we go through this in 9 weeks. The warrant committee gives us the actual number that we do have to reduce. These are potential reductions that we feel we would have to make to reach that $1.7 million reduction that we have been asked to do by the warrant committee and the school committee.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I have so many questions. The point about the business teacher, it would be helpful, I think, in backup. Personally, I have no clue of how many business teachers there are currently, and what does that leave us with? So maybe listing the courses would help clarify that a little bit. And the other question was, maybe that was it, thank you. Oh, no, I know, I'm sorry, the
Go ahead.
guidance counselor. Sorry. last year's budget, we had talked about some other options for guidance in terms of cuts. And if we are in fact to cut a 0.5 guidance counselor, what would that impact be? Obviously, change the student to counselor ratio, but would the head of guidance?
No. No, it's a good question, and we're detailing at the Finance Subcommittee's request reductions that have happened over the past years, and as you remember, to the point about some of these special education cuts, we were going to eliminate the director of guidance and have the high school leadership team take over those roles and responsibilities. That cut reduction didn't work. That person was system-wide K-12. We put that position back as a high school department head at a financial savings, and that person picks up a caseload. The impact of this on students would be a number of students who, you understand, you stay with the same guidance counselor for 4 years, that experience would be interrupted. A number of students from one of the guidance counselors would have to be reassigned to the other 4. And for the remaining guidance counselors, their caseload, again, I referred to, was it tonight or at another audience, that NEASC will, again, when you don't have a high school librarian, discuss your accreditation. They also have very strict rules with numbers, and we've gone over this over the last 10 years, guidance counselor to high school students. We would be, I think Dr. Arangio, with the anticipated enrollment next year, said would be within 3 students of that cutoff. Not a number that you want to be, and we have comparative data for other districts. When we went through this guidance discussion in past years, what the students' guidance counselor ratio is. So they're very important positions.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
I guess a question and a comment. One question is, some of the cuts, especially on page 5, the number of buses from 10 to 9, the sped efficiencies, installing the burner. Some people might say, well, why wouldn't you do those anyway? I mean, clearly, there's a lot of impact and negative impact, but if there are any efficiencies that can be done, why aren't we doing them anyway? And those just are 3 that came to mind.
Well, it's very interesting that you said that, because we wanted to stay with this presentation, but we have a list of utility, electricity and heat and lighting efficiencies that have been made over the last 3 years. But the total efficiencies, Mr. Gillis, were in dollars?
In just those categories? I'd need that
You
in
know,
front of me, but
rather than
we're
Mr.
pushing
Gillis
$2
saying
million on utilities over the last 3 years.
efficiencies. And so that's a whole nother presentation of the efficiencies that we've made. We said to the staff yesterday, do you remember last year, take all of the air conditioners, the heaters, the small, Mr. Gillis himself manually did this work with the custodians. I said to the teachers, that has reaped benefits. And what I said to the teachers, the way that I look at these budgets, every time we save a teacher, that's it. Save a teacher in front of children. So I said to them, all of your efforts around energy, and I said, look at all the discussion the school committee went through before they approved the solar panels on the roofs of the school. Those are not for aesthetic reasons. Those are to save energy, which saves dollars, which puts teachers in front of Milton Public School students.
2 teachers.
And so to Ms. Bagley-Jones's point, we're always looking for efficiencies. But Mr. Walker said, Ms. Gormley, why do you have that bus up on that list? You know, we started the school year and we had an issue around residency, and we had an issue around transportation that involved several of our parents and families. And again, it was aggravating to our parents and guardians of our students. And so Mr. Phelan has started a committee looking at the start times, and that's another one of those cuts and reductions that we're not sure that we can make. But again, in our kind of language, to reduce those buses would mean that's not having to eliminate that 2nd or 4th grade teacher. or that science teacher at the high school. And so, again, when we do this, you know, when I asked Mr. Pavlicek when we started this and said, could we take the 1.7 and divide it and tell you how many teachers or how many administrators, teachers, and custodians? And we were asked for the backup. So you could see that. I want to bring the public back to one other point. Last year, you remember that we divided our cuts, non-personnel cuts and personnel cuts. And we did non-personnel cuts that you can only do once. And so last year, we made cuts and reductions in professional development and text materials and supplies that I and the leadership group wanted to add money to this budget for text materials and supplies. I believe without the MFE and the PTOs, we, again, we're at a breaking point in text materials and supplies. You cannot cut in the Milton Public Schools text materials and supplies again. You cannot cut professional development again. We looked at every aspect of the budget. The finance subcommittee goes through the budget on different lines, looking at, again, utilities, text materials and supplies, personnel, revolving accounts. We looked at every single aspect of the budget to come up with this $1.7 million worth of cuts, recommended draft.
Mr. Walker?
But I think to Ms. Bagley-Jones's point, there's a small number of things that we would do anyway.
Yes.
For example, it makes sense on a $3.6 million budget where you have a new SPED director to say, could you look for some efficiencies? It certainly makes sense to install boiler modifications that might result in a 5 to 7% reduction in heat consumption. And certainly on the solar farm work, we're going to move forward with that no matter what. So I think there's a small, these are really difficult cuts, but there are a few cases where they make sense no matter what.
And so I'm sorry if I didn't respond fully to your question. Some of these absolutely are going to happen.
If I may.
Yes.
So, some of them will happen just like they have in the past. The facilities group has made those types of reductions. So they will happen with the efficiencies if we can implement them. However, the two at the top, the bus fee is one that you would not want to have to implement because you're going to charge your parents more money to ride a bus, and that's a hardship for them. Reducing the bus could very well put us back into the position of having a hardship for all of our parents, that their buses will run a little longer, be a little more crowded. So those two top ones would be ones that we might not want to do, despite the fact that we'll have the time study. And the ones below that are definitely ones that we'd like to look at and make any efficiencies as we've had in the past in these types of areas.
And to your point, it's an excellent discussion because you could say if the Milton Public School budget was fully funded, then you could take cost savings from the solar panels and start new programs and hire new people and replace the money that you eliminated last year in text materials and supplies. Bring you back your professional development budget to what it should be, comparable with other districts. We could start piloting programs. Right now, even the finance subcommittee said this budget is on a basis of no new staff members. So it's important for people looking at this for the first time, well, do they have another page that they're adding any positions? No. This is moving the system ahead with no new staff.
Ms. Kelly?
You can go, and then I'll go.
If you could just go back to the previous slide on this. So under the cost code, those are the two items, the H, which means we're basically going forward with it. The boiler burner modifications will invest some money this year that will help us for next year, right? So we're definitely moving forward with that. And then the heat charge back, I think what you talked about was deferred maintenance that we'll do we won't be able to do next year because of the fact that we're offsetting. But all the other ones are marked as S's because they are truly in flux. And to that point, we have a plug number for each of our teachers at $57,000. And I think that amounted to, what, 26.5 total FTE? In actuality, because of the way the union works, or the union, contract works, it's the people who last came in will be the first to go out, which means they're typically come in at a lower salary rate, is that right? And so the FTEs, in fact, if we truly had to cut $1.7 million, the FTE would end up being much more than what the 26 we're talking about. Is that correct, or are we?
Not entirely that way. We use the number of 57,000 as an average of folks that do not have professional status. Typically, when we hire somebody, we don't necessarily hire at the top of the scale, but sometimes the pool, depending on a position, and I'm sure John and Mary can elaborate on examples if you would like them, the pool in that position might be somebody with 10 or 15 years' experience, and we place them on the salary schedule based on their years and experience and where they would fit in our system. So that's why that average isn't, necessarily the bachelor's or master's step one, but it is lower than the average teacher salary in the system. So we're fairly confident that that number will be pretty close. It could be 28, could be 24, but the 26 and a half, we believe, is pretty close.
Okay.
And may I add one more thing to that point, talking about the people? Yesterday, when we presented to the staff, we spoke to the school committee and the finance subcommittee, and I want to assure the public, Mr. Walker had some very good advice about this is not going to be next May or June. This is a 9-week process to February, because we have gone through this process before, and we had a very successful individual in one of our disciplines who came up on this list 2 times, and that individual said, I have to go to a district where I have security. So as the head of the school district, I said to the teachers, this is a process we have to go through. These parents and guardians are vested in their public schools, and I don't want people looking elsewhere now or February. I said, we'll keep you informed. I said, I'm letting you know before we present publicly, so you understand this is a process, but I don't want anybody fooled or anyone thinking that, that this exercise doesn't cause anguish among the staff. And it was interesting to me that in the presentations, there were veteran teachers there. And so I said to the audience, of course the veteran teachers are there, because one, support for the new teachers, but also their job descriptions, their caseloads, a lot of them, what they teach is going to change. I can think of an English teacher who was in the back of the room, the advocate for those programs that are up there for the English cut. So again, we said this is a process. We look to February to know, but again, it does have an impact on the morale of the staff, and we said this is a process that we have to go to. We said this is a community that's voted overrides over the years when other communities didn't. These citizens are vested in their public schools. Again, this is a process, but I couldn't tell them what we were going to get in increases. I said, but I believe that this is a community that wants to fully fund their public schools. And that's been my experience.
Ms. Kelly.
So I just want to also mention that I'm concerned that we have 3 FTEs of SPED that are on this cut list. I don't know in actuality, if we had to, whether we could achieve that. I think that would be pretty momentous if we could. Additionally, in tallying up the different levels of cuts, the elementary is $410,000 of teaching. The Pierce Middle School is about $344 of teachers, and the high school is $325. And I guess I just raised the question, how did you come up with sort of those levels? And was there something behind it, or just the way it ended up, or how did that come up?
2 things I want to reply to you. One, you said 3 FTEs in special education, but you should also add the educational assistants.
Oh, I know,
So I just want to bring back, that those are under the educational. And when we make these cuts and reductions as a team, we don't take the 1.7 and divide it in 3 or in half. We work collaboratively. And I think that speaks to your leadership team. And it's a philosophical issue that when you think of it, 2,000 children are at your elementary and 2,000 children are at your middle and high. And so you tallied up the different levels. I didn't tally up the different levels and say you're a little bit light on one level and you're heavier on another level. So you could look at it 3 different levels, elementary, middle, and high, or you could look 2,000 children at the elementary, 2,000 children at the middle and high. Again, we do this collaboratively, and we do it as a leadership team. And I think that it's interesting. We were probably so interested in and worked so hard to get to the bottom number that in checking every one of these against, again, we use a plug, we use an average number, but for where we could to have actual numbers.
And then just one final comment, and that is that I truly appreciate the administration and leadership team's time that they devoted to this. I think as a town, we need to keep in mind that the time, you know, the hours that they spend coming up with things that will break down a system that we you know, take pride in and that we spent years trying to build up is time that cannot be put towards improving what we presently have. And so to the extent that we can change the level of up and down that we need to go through. Unfortunately, the past several years have been very tough. Hopefully, the economy will be coming out of its doldrums pretty soon, but this is very difficult, not from a morale perspective, but just from a moving a system forward perspective. So I truly appreciate the time that you put into this. Thank you.
And so we are optimistic, working with the warrant committee and the town, that we're going to be able to have a fully funded budget. And next steps will be working with the finance subcommittee and the warrant committee subcommittee every Monday morning, working with the school committee. We have dates that we'll post tomorrow, identified in January at each of our 6 schools. School committee members and the leadership team go out, make a similar presentation, listen to the response from the public, and we're going to have on the web a final page where we'll keep a running, Mr. Gillis and Mr. Phelan, we'll keep a running answers and questions. Individuals who have questions like came up tonight, we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation.
Anything else?
A couple of things stand out to me. What a painful process for everybody, but especially for you guys having done this. But I also really think how transparent it is and how real it is. It's not scare tactics, as some people have felt in past years that there's been scare tactics. It feels very real, very realistic. I do worry about the cuts to all cuts, but the cuts to alternative ed, the reading teachers, because then that just creates a vicious cycle of kids need more help, which then, as Linda Lee was saying, then creates more special ed costs. I mean, we're in a vicious cycle. We can't do the intervention and prevention to help kids stay out of special ed. And, you know, I think it's really important for town to understand we don't have a choice, and nor should we have a choice about providing special ed services to our children. But it's a legal mandate. It's not because we're nice people, but it's the right thing to do. But so the more we cut in intervention, the more we're going to end up with more sped costs, which we have to provide, and we should provide as a community. But if we want, you know, anyway. But I'm just struck at the havoc that this looks at. The havoc, I mean, we're talking about moving kids from schools, which we've never done before. We're talking about changing school times for any parents who have kids in 2 schools, or working parents, or just parents who are busy. The idea of changing a school time at this point for next year, increasing class size, impacting the adequate yearly progress at the Pierce around math, the no after-school library. When I look at the kids who are going to be hanging out on the street instead of being at the library and not getting homework club and not having time in between sports to study, I mean, it's just crazy to me. No SAT prep. The health, I was going to, you know, I've been making a push for more health education because I know that we really need more in our health education, and now we're talking about cutting it even more, and it really is the last strand of the health if we had to go forward with this cut. So that's really concerning. the cuts to art, music, drama across the board, and I hope parents can hear how evenly those cuts are. I mean, all the so-called non-essentials are pretty much slapped in the face, as well as the essentials are slapped in the face with these cuts. So I guess I'm just really concerned, the guidance cuts, all the havoc that this will ensue. And it doesn't mean we don't do this process, but people have to understand, like you said, Mary, at the beginning, it is a process, but I'm just really struck at the havoc, the potential havoc that these cuts could have. And a lot of cuts and a lot of havoc. So I'm glad that you did this and you did it so transparently, because we need to do this process. But it's not, I mean, if we weren't all depressed before we came in here, we should all be depressed now. As a mental health person, I can, attest to that. But I'm really concerned, and I'm concerned about the impact on you guys. I'm concerned about I know teachers will start looking, no matter what you say, Mary. They want to go to a district that won't do this to them every year. So, anyway, I'll be quiet, but I'm really concerned and appreciative, as Ms. Kelly said, about your efforts to make this fair, equitable, and transparent.
And to that point, the PTO said they understand the process. This is really a collaborative effort. I had ideas for cuts that I was outvoted at the leadership team on. And so I might go out and do the presentation, or the three of us might be here, but it's a collaborative effort. It's a collaborative effort. And so that when we make changes, every round of changes, I would send to the school committee, the finance subcommittee, and to the principals, because again, to your point, they own the implementation. And as I said to the PTO presidents, and I said to the staff yesterday, if you have any ideas, I should tell them Mr. Gillis wasn't there, and they identified some doors that were open in the back of the elementary schools for recess. So, but at least they're thinking.
Yeah.
But I said, if you,
Letting out
again,
the heat.
they're into they understand the impact of the energy savings. But I said, if they have ideas, or they could identify any cost savings in the school district, they should speak up to their principals, department heads, or one of the three of us.
Mr. Walker?
So, Mary, I'm pleased with this process. These are very, very difficult discussions and difficult cuts that we're talking about. I'm pleased that it was a collaborative process, because if this is the leadership team that we need to continue to move the system forward, that's important, that they feel like this was part of their work and they have some investment in it. These are not cuts that we want to make or should make. So I think now largely the responsibility shifts to us. And we're going to start the process of briefing the warrant committee and advocating with the warrant committee for the funding and the resources that we need. And I would encourage parents to talk to us, but also to talk to members of the warrant committee, because these aren't cuts we should make. I appreciate the process. I think it's well done, and I think, as many of us have said this evening, it illustrates how close we're running to level funding all the time. And as Mary said, there's a fundamental structural problem with the way we do financing. That's a bigger challenge and a multi-year challenge. But I hope that we will now all become advocates for getting the resources that we need, because these aren't cuts we should make.
Oh, and Lee.
Sorry. Thank you also to you and your leadership team. And Ms. Gormley, I think it would be helpful to identify, when you speak of your leadership team, it's not just the principals, it's more than that, correct?
We meet with the principals, the special ed director, and the three of us, and that's our leadership team. We, during the process, we went to our department heads, directors, and vice principals, but I said to them, we try to make this all participatory, but as I said to them, don't ever feel badly not being in these meetings, because as the English department head, do you want to say at the meeting, I have a great idea for the athletic department? I can identify at the high school what cuts you should make at the elementary, what I said when I brought them in. These are the cuts. If you have ideas, bring them forward in the open meeting, after the meeting, or if you see cuts in your department, they collaborate with their principals, and you want to refine a cut, you want to tailor a cut, you want to advocate that cut should be changed to another area within your department, you can speak forward. But you're not going to come to the table and say, I'm not going to take that cut in my department, but I think that I know the math department can take that cut. So, again, the department heads and directors and vice principals are involved. We have them in meetings, and they came and they had ideas within their department that have been incorporated into these cuts. But again, we rely on our principals, our special ed director, and the three of us, and the school committee and finance committee.
Thank you for that clarification. Also, so just one follow-up thing. Knowing that this warrant committee meeting is the first week in February, would it not be prudent to hold off on those meetings with the PTOs until after that meeting when we know what the cuts are? So could we maybe postpone those dates? I mean, yes, I understand, full disclosure and transparency, and that's what we're, opening the doors to all that tonight. But if those cuts may not happen to the degree that we've proposed or we've been asked to demonstrate, would it be beneficial, I guess, just to hold off until after that? So I'm just raising that. We don't even have to answer it now, but.
Well, I'll chime one thing in. Back to Mr. Walker's point about us being advocates at this point and really needing to go forward and advocate for a budget other than the one we've seen here tonight. One of the places we are going to need to advocate is going to be in January, and that's going to be as the legislature is starting to put together, the governor's starting to put together preliminary budget figures for House 1 and local aid and so forth. We need to be out there making, a case that if, revenues have exceeded their expectations for fiscal 12 and they're looking at a better position for fiscal 13, then local aid needs to be part of that equation. And that's one of the, it's only so far you can go with the warrant committee because they have so much money, but if you can go to, use your legislators to push for better state funding to the community, then that gives the warrant committee more to play with. And that's really more of a January issue, an early February issue than it is a later February issue. So for that reason, I would advocate to get the message out to our parents to help us advocate at that level early. I understand your reluctance to really keep hammering this if it may not come to pass, but I think there are reasons to have it in the forefront even before January. Ms. Kelly.
I agree. I think keeping it in January is the right way to go, because I think even to advocate at town meeting, there'll be a special town meeting, I'm not sure when. I think the more people that we can have a very clear understanding of what the budget impacts would be of really any dollar cut, the better off we're going to be as a community in terms of moving the schools forward. So I agree that I don't like people to get upset by what we'll talk about, but similar to the caveats that we've talked about here, unfortunately, this is the process that Milton goes through because we don't have a increasing pie for us to talk about every year. It may be that we're lucky this year, but I think last year worked out really well, the fact that we had really informed parents as we were moving through this process. So I would opt for staying with the January timetable if possible.
I think it's a really good point, and I think one of the things, what Linda Lee said, I think one of the things that happens is our credibility gets called into question because, oh, the wolf is at the door. Here are the cuts we're going to have to, and parents hear that and then say, oh, but you didn't turn around and do that. So maybe there's a way to brainstorm, the administration on how the message is presented, because I do think people will hear us in January if we do go ahead with the PTO meetings and say, see, they didn't make the cuts. They didn't make the cuts. They didn't really mean it. And that really speaks to our credibility. And sometimes parents just need to understand the process, as Ms. Kelly is saying. This is what Milton has to go through. oh well. But I am concerned with what Linda Lee is bringing up about we're gonna go through this process in January and then not know until February. So is there a way to balance the two things that you are both saying? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not asking for an answer, I'm just sort of raising it as something for us to think about.
I would also argue that it may even go beyond February, that it's often, we don't find out what the state, get a ballpark of what the state's going to until later on. And sometimes there's some funds that are found along the process that are brought to the floor of town meeting. So I think, again, I totally agree. I think we have to get maybe better at explaining why this is a process, why it's necessary. And maybe before we say any of these cuts, it's always if we don't get, the $35 million that is needed, this is what we'll have to do. And just keep reiterating. So I totally understand that our credibility does get put into question, but that's only if we say we are going forward and we're going to have to cut all of these things. I think we just need to your point, couch it in the correct way.
We need procedurally, I think, to make a couple of votes here. First off, we need to make a preliminary budget request to the warrant committee, which I would suggest is the $35 million number of level service. And then we're going to need to approve this presentation to the warrant committee of what the, at least an initial projection of the effect of a level dollar budget would be. So I think those are procedurally probably the way to proceed at this point. So I would entertain, assuming that the level service budget is the one we would put in as our initial request, I would move that we, I would have entertain a motion to recommend an initial request to the warrant committee of $35,739,719 for fiscal 13. And Mr. Gillis has broken it out among our usual 7 categories, or at least an initial breakout of our usual 7 categories. So I would suggest probably the motion would be, if this actually adds up to the right amount, at least for a preliminary number, that would be our preliminary breakdown.
So moved.
So I move that we submit to the warrant committee a budget of $35,739,719 with the following detail attached. Mr. Gillis's fiscal 12 general fund budget summary and the various attachments for non-salary and salary reductions, including the impact summaries, which detail how we might approach a $1,710,376,000 cut to get us to level funding.
I think you've just combined both motions into
Yes, I
one.
did, purposely.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Sorry.
Yes, I'll second.
Ms. Kelly.
Seeing that this is the first time anyone's seen this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong.
Went out an email about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, it did? Okay, I apologize, I didn't see it. I have some questions on some of this that I would not like this document yet to go. I think in the past, and Mary, if you can help me, this is what we've submitted for the initial, and then as part of the binders, and that would be part of the binders, we would go through the detail of the budget itself.
I
So
agree.
I would much rather, because this is really where we've been concentrating on, have this be the thrux, definitely 35,739 being our bottom line in terms of level service budget.
I agree.
Mr. Walker?
How about if we say that we will include it as an attachment after we're comfortable with the format and numbers?
Sure.
So
fine.
to be submitted to the warrant committee at the point where we're comfortable, as an attachment, but once we're comfortable.
And just as a caveat, the school subcommittee of the warrant committee has asked us to meet with them on the 7th, at which time the intention is for us to bring our budget binders with us, this would be included as part of that. So we have a little work to do. So certainly by the time we meet with at least subcommittee of the warrant committee, we would have the full documentation and backup behind it. So I don't know whether that changes your opinion, but
Well, just the distinction between what documents we're voting to actually submit to the warrant committee and what, as opposed to what backup we might show them as support for those. So I'm proposing that the documents we submit are the, a budget number of 35 million and two other documents in support. This presentation with its detail and impact information and this general fund budget summary once we're comfortable.
and so I guess I would say to you that we don't meet again till Monday, and if we're not going to submit this until Monday, if we're saying that they have to go combined, then we won't have a chance to work on this till Monday. And if we want to hold off submission to the warrant committee until Monday, we can do that. If we want to get something to the warrant committee tomorrow, which is the deadline, I would go with this document and hold off on this one. But